So early in our marriage, Matt and I lived in an old farmhouse. It was the house that we actually brought our oldest home from the hospital to. We rented this home from someone that we knew well, and it was the perfect home for that season and time of our lives. And it was also a house that told time, not with minute and hour hands, but with the just noticeable crooked placement of the tile on the kitchen floor, or the light switches that turned on lights or even appliances in totally different rooms from where they were. This house told time by way of the do-it-yourself projects that allowed a family to live and grow and love within its walls, and sometimes beyond its original walls. Some of those mystery light switches were on the porch that had been closed in at some point. We were also pretty sure that the kitchen had once been part of the porch and never been insulated in the way that interior spaces should be insulated. When the weather was freezing, the kitchen was freezing. There were also layers of flooring in each room, and the baffling idea to put carpet over original hardwood in some. There were closets and attic spaces upstairs that had been reimagined as a nook for desks and reading and play, and hooks that had been added on the walls in strategic places for coats and backpacks, for towels and bags, for all the things. Nothing was perfectly right, and everything was good. We loved living in this house, in this home that held so much time and so many stories, that held space and breath and room. An old farmhouse that had always been enough. And when it wasn't, it could expand and grow. Finish an attic space here, expand an outside wall there. There is always room. That is what Jesus promises today in his words to the disciples. In my Father's house, there are many dwelling places. If it were not so, would I have told you that I go to prepare a place for you? Where I am, there you may be also. With Jesus, there is always room. Jesus is sharing these words with his disciples as his farewell, his goodbye. Jesus and the disciples are gathered for the Last Supper. Jesus has washed their feet and told them that they should love one another in this same way. And then Jesus continues to speak, to share the words that he wants the disciples to hold close in the coming days and always. And these words are not about a task for the disciples, or something for which they must strive, or something that they can get right, or that they can achieve. These words of Jesus are a promise about who Jesus is, about who God is, and about how God continues to be present to us, how God continues to come close and love us. With Jesus, there is always room. I am the way and the truth and the life. Jesus shares these words on the night before he will die on the cross, on the day before he will be laid in the tomb. What is the way forward when everything feels small and limited? What is the next truthful step when hope is entombed behind the deceptions and hardness of the world? What is life in the face of death and loss and grief? The disciples will encounter and hold all of these questions in the coming days. And on the night before he dies, Jesus offers the disciples, offers us the answer. I am the way and the truth and the life. Jesus' answer is nothing short of himself. When there is no way, no space, no room, Jesus is the way, expansive and abundant, defying every limitation, every small heart and mind. When truth seems elusive, Jesus is the Word. And when death speaks, resurrection speaks louder. This is who Jesus is. This is who the disciples have known Jesus to be. That's what Jesus tells Thomas and Philip. You know me, Jesus says to each of them. I have come near to you and we have shared life together. We have made room where there was none. Water into wine at Cana so that the celebration might continue. A meeting with the Samaritan woman at the well because this way that we walk together is for all of us, even or especially for the ones that we think do not belong. The feeding of the 5,000 where the abundance was so great that there were 12 baskets full of leftovers. The raising of Lazarus, because even in death, Jesus comes near and makes a way. And then I also think about Jesus' birth. We don't get the familiar nativity story in the Gospel of John. The beginning of John tells us that Jesus is the Word, the truth that has been present since the beginning. But the Gospel of Luke tells us that there was no room in the inn. That as God came near to us in Jesus, the world said that there was no space, no room, no possible way for God to come near. And even as a newborn, Jesus is the way and the truth and the life, preparing a home and a place where it did not seem possible, beyond the walls, in closets and nooks that were forgotten, in a stable amongst the animals. This is who Jesus is, and the disciples know Jesus. We know Jesus. And so when Jesus, who is the way and the truth and the life, says that he goes to prepare a place for us, we can imagine physical places and structures. We can take comfort in knowing that we will dwell with Jesus at our death. And this place that Jesus prepares for us is also more than that, because everything with Jesus is always more. Always beyond, always 12 baskets full of leftovers. Since the time that Jesus shared these words with the disciples, we have tried and tried again and tried once more to make them smaller. We have tried to limit them, and we have tried to limit Jesus. Tried to somehow place Jesus back in the tomb, back within the walls of our own comfort. Reminds me of the story of Nicodemus and Jesus, where Nicodemus comes by night and Jesus tells him that he must be born again from above. And Nicodemus says, how can these things be? How can I enter again into my mother's womb? And here we are over and over and over again trying our darndest to put Jesus back into the tomb, to encapsulate him within boundaries and walls, making his words the line in the sand that folks must cross in order to achieve a dwelling place with God, in order to excel in being near to Jesus, making life with Jesus about getting it right, about rigid rules. And as we do that time and time again, I imagine Jesus shaking his head and saying, as he does today to Thomas and to Philip, you know me. You know the way where I am. We have shared life together, and there is always more. There is always room. Abundant, expansive spaciousness. And so if the disciples had forgotten who Jesus is or had forgotten his words at the Last Supper, they were reminded on that first Easter day when the way of Jesus extended beyond the walls of their wildest imaginings, even beyond the tomb. And we are reminded again on this 5th Sunday of Easter and on every Sunday. With Jesus, there is always room. Dwelling with Jesus, abiding with Jesus is not about getting it right. It is about knowing. Not in the sense of answers or certainty, but in relationship. Jesus comes near to us and wants us to know him, to abide with him here and now, in the place and the relationship, in the communion that Jesus prepares for us and that Jesus implores us to invite others into. Always more room. And we do this so that when we meet the limits of this world, and we will, we have, we do, when we meet the limits of this world, when we cannot see the way forward, when truth is distant and when death is close, Jesus abides with us and we abide with Jesus. That is our place. We know the way and the truth and the life. We know the one who holds our times in his hands. And we know that there is always more room, more space to live and to grow and to love. And in the abundance of Jesus, we do not let our hearts be troubled.